Hello?
Hello there, is this Mr. Ron Frenz?
This is Ron Frenz, yes.
Hi, this is Matt Wentz. We spoke earlier this week.
Hello, Matt Wentz, how are you?
I am wonderful and honored, sir. Thank you very much.
Oh, don't be honored. Don't be honored. That's overreacting, Matt. That's overreacting.
I will firstly apologize. You may hear dogs or kids in the background, such is the wonderfulness of a weekend morning.
Well, that's okay, because if I were at home, you might be hearing my cat complaining too.
That, yeah.
But I am at my studio, so there's nobody here to complain.
Well, yeah, my dogs like to make sure that I, answer their every whim, and then, so do the kids.
Well,
so,
that's what humans are here for.
Right.
So I give you a lot of credit.
Thank you. I'm also curious, is it okay if I record this so I have a record that I can get back to?
Absolutely. I was kind of figuring if we were gonna talk on the phone that you'd probably do that, but it's not a problem at all.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. Firstly,
when
again,
you transcribe it, though, I would ask you as a personal favor to take out anytime I say stuff or jazz to edit it out because I say it way too much.
I can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much. This truly does mean the world to me. You were, when I really started getting into comic books, it was that 1991, 1992 era. So Eric was my Thor. One of the first comics bought for me off the rack of the old Walden book spinners was Thor 450. So,
okay.
So
yeah.
Your art and Eric as Thor was like my childhood. So
very cool.
Yeah, this is amazing to me.
Well, I'm glad I could contribute at least a little bit. Certainly, Facebook has proven to me that is the connection. The connection is the honor of being part of people's childhood nostalgia.
Yeah.
Not to be self-effacing or anything, but nobody really cares about me. What they care about is sharing that connection to a comic book or a cover or a story that they remember fondly from their youth. The buying it and reading it under a tree with a lemonade on the way to their grandma's house. That kind of thing is those kind of connections are the ones that really resonate with people.
Yeah.
On Facebook.
I currently live in Arizona. We moved here in about 92, 93. But I grew up in a small Illinois town of like 800 people. And because of Facebook, I still chat with my best friend across the street about comics.
There you go.
And so to us, Infinity War, that entire era was, the Series 3 Marvel cards were like the currency of school.
I gotcha.
Yeah. So, one of the reasons that this is such an honor and I love to talk to you and why I wrote the blog is like Eric meant a lot to me as a kid because I'm left-handed and we didn't really have any left-handed superheroes. And then as an adult, I start to see how much more human he is. He's a dad. He's kind of got like a little bit of that willing to do anything for everybody. When I was thinking of like, how do I want to like introduce myself to this was he strikes me as a bit of like John McClane from Die Hard in that he's the guy who may not necessarily rush into being a hero all the time, but he's the guy who knows it's the responsibility to do the right thing.
Somebody's got to do it. Yeah.
Right. And whether it was him hanging out with Thor or as Thor, using Thor as a stand-in or Thunderstrike, he was always there to do the right thing.
That's a pretty accurate overview. A lot of what Tom and I did at the time were, you got to remember the context too. The context in the early 90s was, the image kind of movement where everybody, Wolverine was very popular. The Punisher was very popular. It was all about anti-heroes racking up a body count.
Right.
And what Tom and I, even though, a lot of people saw the cover to Thunderstrike #1 and assumed that it was part of that movement. If you read the book, we were moving counter to that in every way possible.
Right.
We wanted Eric, most of our characters, whether it's Mayday or Eric or any of the other characters that we've co-created or worked on, we want them to be decent human beings that you don't mind spending 15 minutes to a half an hour with every month, that you enjoy checking in with them and maybe get a little bit of inspiration from them and stuff. So it was always our plan. There's the only thing with Eric that's not a part of me or Tom is the fact that he was a father. And that was something that we had talked about wanting to do because we wanted to parallel some of the things that Don Blake didn't. And one of those things was Thor's relationship with Odin in my opinion, should always be one of the cornerstones of the book, because if you still want to bring a younger audience in, one of the ways that a younger audience can actually still relate to a character like Thor is that he's always disappointing his dad.
Right.
That kind of thing. The element of the family drama was a very big part of a lot of Stan's original concepts. A lot of the work he did with Kirby and a lot of the work he did with Ditko. Spider-Man was about, as much as anything, was about Pete's relationship with Aunt May. Thor was about his relationship with his dad. So there was this family element that young readers could relate to. Even if you can't relate to being a god of thunder bringing down storms on people, you can relate to, not getting along with your dad, not agreeing with what your dad is trying to tell you.
Right.
So we wanted to bring that in as a parallel, having Eric's relationship with Kevin parallel Thor's relationship with Odin.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. At the time, my brother was married and divorced and had a young son. So I was witnessing some of this firsthand. But that was the only thing. And neither Tom nor I ever had kids of our own. So we couldn't relate to that directly, but we wanted the one deal we made with ourselves, and the reason that Kevin is named Kevin is because on The Greatest American Hero, he had a son named Kevin, and Kevin disappeared like halfway through the series and didn't even show up at Ralph's wedding and things like that, And I told Tom, I said, if we're going to introduce a kid, one, let's name him Kevin, as a reminder to never lose track of him.
Right.
If we're going to give Eric a son, then that's got to be, real close to the center of his universe at all times. And Tom completely agreed with that. And Kevin shows up Kevin shows up in the second issue that we introduced Eric and Thor. And Kevin was with the series all the way till the end and played a huge part in the decisions that Eric made. And also went on to A-Next and that 2010 miniseries.
Yeah, and that's what makes, reading it as an adult, it's like you've got that love for your kids and you're like, yeah, you'd do anything up into including, for Eric, it's the final sacrifice. And there's no question about it. It's no, this is what has to be done.
Sure.
Eric, he also seemed like he was the perfect best friend available to everybody in his orbit. Whether it was helping Thor or even being, okay with the ex-wife and the custody battle, as much as he could be, or rooming with Hercules and everything. He just seemed like the best friend that if you're reading a comic book as a kid, you're like, yeah, this is who I'd want to hang out with.
Yeah, he's what he's tried. The one thing, a lot of people, kind of keyed in on the fact that he was a bit of a screw up and he was the rookie, and how long should he still be acting like a rookie, and how quickly should he get control over his powers and all that. And the only thing we ever felt was important as far as his motivation is that he tried. He was always trying his best. If that meant sacrifice, then as long as he knew things were taken care of, ultimately he gave up custody of Kevin because it was best for Kevin. and he realized that it was, that he was being torn between responsibilities. So, everything about him was trying to do the right thing, and that's all any of us can do. So we thought it was a positive message to throw in there every once in a while.
Yeah, in Thor, there's that last page of one of the issues where he gives up custody of Kevin, and there's no dialogue.
Right.
It's just his reaction. And I'm like, it is such a very powerful and relatable thing to. It's not necessarily the thing that you would want to do in a situation, but it's the best thing that you can do.
Yeah, we thought it would be. I mean, we were getting a lot of letters from people who desperately wanted Blood X to be Marcy. They desperately wanted Marcy to be the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you do things like that, you lose track of the fact that at some point Eric left his woman.
Right.
And, and that, you owe an investment in all of your characters to the characters. You're not just telling Eric's story. We needed all the other stuff to fill out the 10 pages. And I had always had a Code Blue story in the back of my head that I was at some point hoping to do as a multi-part backup or something like that, where they took on the Grey Gargoyle. And it tied into how Stone interacts with his people and all this kind of stuff. And the original title for my idea was Men of Stone, because it was all about Stone being standoffish and not really getting friendly with his people, and then juxtaposing that with the gargoyle turning people into stone and blah blah blah. And as we developed the story, it became one of those situations where Tom came up with the doctor and the scientist and her companion, and on and on and on, and juxtaposing that with Eric and his decision to keep going, and then so the title evolved as well. And we were always, that's kind of how we work. We just kind of start with a core of an idea, and then something that we can start hanging themes on, and then decide what the common theme is, and then work from that. And everything. So that's pretty much how we decide to do supporting characters too. Supporting characters should be added for what they can tell you about the lead character. That's really the only reason to add a supporting character is to show you a side of the lead character that no other character or supporting character can do. That's why you add a son. You add a son to see the lead character as a father, and no other character can do that. And Susan was there as the potential happy ending for Eric, but what we liked subverting the easy answers. Because the easy answers are that Eric appreciated Susan and took Susan for granted, but he didn't see Susan in a romantic way. If only life were that simple, that kind of thing. And frankly, I don't think Susan really loved Eric. I think Susan was in love with the idea of being Kevin's mom. I mean, she desperately loved Kevin and was in love with the idea of being Kevin's mom. And if that meant Eric, okay. So she kind of talked herself into the fact that she was in love with Eric, but I don't think she ever really was. She got over him too quickly.
Yeah.
Have really been in love with him.
Yeah. Nice kid, you're okay.
Yeah, I love the kid. Everybody loves Kevin. I love the kid. I mean, she built her life around Kevin to a large degree. And, and it was even contemplating going to the West Coast with the family and all that kind of stuff. So, it's, and in A Next, we suggested that that's exactly what she did. If A Next would have continued, then one of our subplots with Kevin would have been reconnecting with Susan. So, who virtually raised him, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
She was nowhere to be found in the miniseries, mostly because we didn't want to carry over too much from the Thunderstrike series. We didn't want to have to re-educate. We didn't want to do a miniseries where you felt like you had to read all 24 issues of Thunderstrike and all 2 years of Thor to get what was going on with these characters, that kind of thing. So,
but it works as a door. It works as a door, so you can go back and then do that.
Well, you can. I mean, if you're moved to do that, great. But you don't want it to be a requirement to understand what's happening with the characters, in the story you're reading.
Sure.
You want to make sure that all the information they need to enjoy the story, you want to make sure it's right there in that story. And considering what his dynamic was with his mom and dad, and his conflicted attitudes about his dad, how his real dad sacrificed himself and everything, we thought we had plenty to chew on. So we didn't think it would serve the story to have Susan in there as an extra layer or anything. But,
what was your favorite issue to do in the run?
My favorite what? I'm sorry.
The favorite issue to do.
Oh, geez, they're all my kids. It would be very hard to pick one.
That's fair.
I mean, we had a lot of fun with different ones. There was the one, the old bait and switch with Mephisto. That was one that Tom. I was actually in New York, and Tom and I hammered that one out in his office. The old way, basically the way Stan and Jack used to do it, I guess. And we hammered that one out, and I took notes. He did finally put a plot together so he could voucher it, get paid for it. But I was kind of working off my notes. So that was a lot of fun. That was a little different, a lot of fun. And I thought that had a nice little twist to it. Because, I mean, one of the things we always enjoyed doing from the very moment that Eric took over as Thor was subverting some of the assumptions of the way Asgardians do things. And how might a guy from Long Island see things differently than the gods of Asgard, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we always had fun supporting that. That story involved that. The 0 Hour story was interesting because I had an idea for Code Blue that I really wanted to execute. And so what we came up with was the idea that what was going on with Eric was going to, kind of relate to what was going on in this Code Blue story, and we actually plotted them separately. The Code Blue story was done as a separate plot, and the Eric story in there where Bobby has locked himself in the bedroom and because he's coming down off of steroids and everything, were done as two separate stories. I penciled them as two separate stories, and then Tom, once all the pages were done, Tom shuffled them to cut back and forth effectively, from story to story. So those were actually done as like two 10-page stories, and then they were put together as a 20-page story. So that was kind of interesting. So we had fun. He's kind of subverting the form a little bit and keeping ourselves engaged and interested in how we were telling the stories and such. I actually enjoy working with DeFalco on short form stuff. The few times that we went, like on Thor, when we would go to the bi-weeklies and we would do like 17-page stories with 5-page backups. The shorter form, I'm a big fan. Like when I was growing up, there were half-hour shows like Adam 12, where you didn't stand around and dilly-dally. You were telling you had a story to tell in like 20 minutes, and you had to get on with it, that kind of thing. So I enjoy those kind of stories as well. The couple of issues we did where we ran backups in Thunderstrike, just to kind of get ahead on the schedule and everything. The one with Stegron, Spawn, I enjoyed that story very much. So anytime we could interact with the Marvel Universe as a whole, anytime we could show Eric showing up at Avengers Mansion, or guest star the Black Panther, or that kind of thing, and got to handle other characters from the larger Marvel Universe and have Eric interact with them, I enjoyed. Because, any character is only so good in a vacuum, but really shines when you can compare and contrast them to other familiar characters.
Right. I think that's why, for me, issue 21 with the takeoff of Avengers 1 when he's teaming with, She-Hulk and War Machine.
There you go.
Like that right there is...
That was all the joke building to the punchline.
Right.
That started out as, subverting expectation, because everybody at that point was talking about, what was there? There was a miniseries that had Thunderstrike, War Machine, and U.S. Agent in it.
Yes, Terminatrix Objective.
There you go. Mm-hmm. There you go. So there was a lot of that expectation of some new Avengers or some second-tier Avengers team or something, and we were willing to lean into that and have some fun with it because of what we were doing with Loki at the time. But from the very beginning, we knew we were going to get to that last page where we were going to recreate that dynamic where, we could do a lot of good if we teamed up and all this, and then everybody go, and walk away.
Right.
That kind of thing.
As a kid, and growing up, like, I understood the reference of Avengers 1, but then, like, reading through it and it being its own thing leading to the, no, this is fine. Like, as a kid, I got the joke, while at the same time going, but I would read that book.
I would have loved to work on a book like that, right?
Yeah.
I enjoyed it anytime. I mean, all of us, we threw, for God's sakes, with Scott Lang. I mean, of course, Tom had experience working with Scott with Fantastic Four, and I enjoyed War Machine drawing with the War Machine armor because, ultimately, when in A-Next, there's a lot of War Machine in the weight and everything of Mainframe. A lot of the design from War Machine kind of carried over. But it was a lot of fun to do those characters and throw them together as, again, characters who were functioning in the larger Marvel universe. Mm-hmm. And how might they interact and all this kind of stuff. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, at that point, Eric had already met She-Hulk once or twice.
Yeah.
So she was kind of the anchor on that whole thing. But I got a big kick out of that. I got a big kick out of doing anything like that where we got to interact with other characters. Anytime Captain America showed up, of course, the climax where he interacted with the Avengers. Yeah. When he became when he wielded the blood axe and fought them. I always loved Pietro from back in the 60s and 70s, so that was fun to draw Pietro and Quicksilver. But I mean that was it. I mean we tried to have as much fun as possible. Whereas, like on as a contrast on Spider-Girl, we were in our own little pocket universe, and we had a lot of creative freedom because we were in our own little pocket universe. With Thunderstrike, we relished interacting with the rest of the Marvel universe because back then the rest of the Marvel universe was a lot of fun. Mark Grunwald was still around and was writing Quasar, and there was a lot of fun to be had in the Marvel universe at that time. And also kind of pushing back against some of that grittier stuff.
Right. Your book was one that you could always smile through. Was how I always read it.
Good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm kind of biased though, so I wear the love of Eric, literally on me, I have a like sketched out like mace tattooed to my forearm. So it's like, going into this, I'm a bit biased in how I always look at the book. So
Well, that's right. I'm reading through some of your essays and everything too, man. I got to tell you something though. The World Still Needs Heroes was actually originally from the Champions, from the Champion series in the 70s.
from the 70s, which is why then they spin around and use it now.
Yeah, that's why they brought it back. It was one of the essays you wrote for your website, where you kind of suggested that they took it from Eric, but Eric we actually stole it from the Champions. So it makes sense that the Champions would take it back, that kind of thing.
See, and the best thing is being my own editor, I can go, oh, look, I can go back and fix that maybe. Yeah.
Well, it's fine if you brought that, because not everybody has been reading comic books since the 60s.
Right.
But when we were looking for something, because, you're talking about the Everyman Avenger thing, that was something that I came up with at a time when they were going to do all the Avengers books as a family of books, when they were just going to put the A's up there and stuff. So it was, everybody was going to be a something Avenger. And Tom was like, what can we call him? And we're just fighting with it. And I suggested the Everyman Avenger, and he went, that's it. Let's do it. That's fine. So
take it and run.
But that was something from the very beginning. The very first poster advertising Thunderstrike said he's trading in the Rainbow Bridge for the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yep.
And I know I didn't come up with that. I don't think Tom came up with that. I think that came from the sales department. But it was very much the ethos of the book, and worked really well. So we leaned into it, and that was very much one of the things that makes me interested in when we did the Thunderstrike miniseries. Tom and I discussed whether or not to bring Eric back, or to do something different with Kevin in the 616. And I'll be very honest with you, Tom and I had both suffered losses in the years very recent to having to make that decision, which was one of the reasons why we weren't crazy about the idea of just bringing Eric back, So we decided to deal with legacy, and kind of anywhere we went left with Kevin in MC2, we would go right and create as different a character as possible. But as we were working on that miniseries, I found myself very intrigued by the idea of Eric, of injecting Eric into modern day comics. If Eric were to come back, and I don't think it would be that difficult to do, not just because it's comic books, but because, I have an idea in my head that's pretty foolproof as to how we could bring Eric back. If we ever decided to do that, I think it would be interesting to see Eric interacting with the current Marvel Universe, just because if he was a counterpoint then, he's even more of a counterpoint now.
Yeah.
Could you imagine Eric Masterson hearing about the Illuminati?
He would not be all for that.
For God's sakes, he's like, are you guys out of your mind? We're supposed to be the good guys. That kind of thing.
I think that would be a very interesting look, because when you think of who that is, he would be very outgunned. But he'd still be like, this doesn't work.
He would be stunned. And I think he'd even be surprised at some of the choices Captain America has made recently, things like that. There's been so much compromise to the integrity of these characters that it would be fascinating to me to kind of see Eric in his naivete and in his usual numb aplomb interacting with these characters now, and commenting on it. What are you seeing?
Yeah. because he always had that kind of that he was that moral compass guy, and even leading into the final issue, that two part, like when he uses the blood axe on Seth, and then the Avengers show up and they're like, "You killed him in cold blood." Even in the combat with Thor, he's like in there saying, you've got to stop me."
Yeah, stop me. That was the plan. The plan was he was going to let the blood axe take him so he could take out Seth, and then he was going to have the Avengers and Thor kill him.
Right.
I mean, that was his plan. What he realized on the astral plane there was that it was a flawed plan because he was making the grand sacrifice and then he was dumping everything else on the Avengers and Thor and putting them in an impossible position, especially Thor, putting him in the impossible position of killing Eric. So he had to take responsibility for it. He had to do it himself. If that was the end game, then he was going to have to do it himself, and he made the choice. So yeah, I mean, the idea that it's wonderful for me that fans like you remember Eric the way you do. The fact that he turned down Valhalla, the fact that he was Eric Masterson to the end. Everything else was just grafted onto him. Everything else was just a gift. He did the best he could with what he was given. And sometimes it was enough, and sometimes it wasn't. And he had no regrets as long as he was able to save some lives.
Right.
And that's really what it came down to for our 10-pager. That he might have had that moment of doubt, and for me, that last shot of him smiling was wonderful to draw and to execute, but it also has that overlay of melancholy because you know how the story ended.
Right.
He considered walking away right then, but as long as he can save one life, as long as he can, serve that function, as long as he can save one person in the course of a mess, then he's going to keep doing it. He's going to keep doing it even if it kills him. And he meant it.
Yeah.
He meant it.
That last panel on the 10-pager, that I looked at that and I went, that is amazing, and I want to own that. And it's what made me laugh because I've listened to you on Comic Shenanigans with Adam, and I actually reached out to him before reaching out to you because I was like nervous, like how do I do this? But he bought that page 10, the original art.
Yeah.
He bought it 6 hours before I did. I emailed Catskill going, "Is this available?" at like 11 o'clock at night or whatever it was. And they emailed me back going, "We sold it like a couple hours before you did, but these are the other pages available." So he owns page 10. I own page 9 with the knockout on the gray gargoyle. And so that hangs in my bedroom because it's the piece of comic art my wife allows in our bedroom. So.
That's very sweet.
Yeah.
My only real regret about that 10 pages is that Al Milgrom was not available to do it. He had just recently had surgery on his hand and was not able to join us for that whole thing. I mean, Keith Williams was able to step in and did a wonderful job. But it would have meant more to me if we could have gotten Al. I mean, it would have been great if we could have gotten the whole band back together.
Sure.
Letterers and colorists and the whole bit. But that was not necessarily to be either. But overall, I thought it served its function, and as I've said in a few interviews, I'm always gratified and always a little surprised, and I love how people fondly remember Eric, and whenever anybody asks for a sketch of him or comes up with a run of books to sign at a convention, I'm always happy to talk about Eric because he's going to haunt me forever. So that's one of the reasons I didn't do. I'm sure you've heard the story. I didn't do Spider-Girl initially because I wanted to do A next because of Kevin. Those designs, those initial designs for MC2 Kevin were up on my wall within a year of Thunderstrike ending, which was several years, at least 2 or 3 or 4 years before we ended up doing A Next.
Mm-hmm.
So Kevin was already designed when A Next came around. But yeah, I mean, it's to this day. I mean, the stuff I have up on my wall in front of me right now as I sit at my studio is the cover we did for Thor recently with Thunderstrike on it.
Okay.
That 90s flashback thing that they did for some reason,
Mm-hmm.
and Xeroxes of some of the black and white art from the Kevin miniseries made by Sal. So you know, I'm still incredibly fond of those characters. If anybody wanted us to step in and do something more with either Kevin or Eric, no time would pass before I said yes, as long as DeFalco was also involved.
Sure. See, and that's great because that was like one of the other questions. Like, if they ever ask you to do an ongoing or a limited series, how long would it take you to say sure and be ready to go? You know.
It would all be dependent on whether it was with Tom or not. I really don't have any. I don't have any sadistic need to try to work on the character with somebody new who may not get him, who may not feel the same way about him that I do, or understand him the way we do. You know, that kind of thing. That would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Because I am so connected to the character, that would be a real problem.
You don't. You don't want to train someone new. So.
No, and they would have their own take. They would, they
Mm-hmm.
would have their own feelings about it. They're being hired to write it, so it would be, their take. Within the confines of Marvel Comics' own Thunderstrike, their take is every bit as valid as mine. It just would be personally difficult for me to do it. I mean, I read some of the Asgardians of the Galaxy stuff, and I liked some of what they were trying to do with Kevin, that they were still handling him like he was a human being. He was. I wish he would have been more of the human voice of the team, and a little less of the. He seemed to be like the disaffected teen character, which, that was part of the journey he was on in the miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of felt like they were rehashing some of what we had already covered in the miniseries, because by the time he gets to the end of the miniseries, he gets it.
He does.
By the time we get to the end of the miniseries, he understands why his dad did what he did. And he is now walking a mile in his dad's shoes, just like MC2 Kevin. It just took him a little longer to get there. That and the other thing that I had a real problem with in Asgardians of the Galaxy is, as far as I'm concerned, Grunhilde is part of the cast. I mean, Kevin doesn't go anywhere without Grunhilde.
Mm-hmm.
At least for the first several years of whatever his career would be. I mean, if we ever got to do an open-ended Kevin series, Grunhilde would be an integral part of it. And if and when we decided she was going to leave the series, it would be a major turning point for the character. So it struck me as odd that Grunhilde wasn't even mentioned.
Yeah, that was something that I also noticed like a couple of years ago they had done when they were doing that Fear Itself miniseries. They did like this 3-part short story where it was Kevin and it was X-23 and it was like Amadeus Cho and they were fighting some like.
Yeah, I saw that. I like that even less though because they drew Kevin as big and lumbering.
And he seemed like a little bit.
To be that,
yeah, and he seemed like a bit of an asshole, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not.
I mean, it's interesting because they read what Todd DeFalco puts down, and that's what they take away from it.
Right.
Is that he's a douche, and it's like, no, he's not.
And to my gladfulness, I guess, when they did Asgardians, he was a little bit less of that. I was, and it's like I was excited he was back, and I even had, I think issue 3 was the only issue that had a letters page, and I ended up having one in there. And I had to say, like, yeah, and I had to buy like 6 copies and hand them out to people. But it was like, you're always a kid at heart. And, and I told the writer, like, thank you for at least bringing him back and acknowledging his existence. And as the series continued, like, I was a little upset slash wondering why they never explored the relationship with Scourge a bit more, seeing that Scourge's axe was responsible for his dad's death.
He was there, yeah.
And then, but there was an issue where I think they go to save Annabelle Riggs from, whatever weird spook forest. And, Kevin kind of seems to, channel his inner dad of, you don't have to ask. We're a team and a family, and I'm going with you, And for what that series was, I did enjoy his relationship with Throg, because at least that was fun. But the fact that Grunhilde had basically been all but forgotten, and then how they did War of the Realms, it was, well, wait a minute, you just kind of offed every Valkyrie that ever lived, with much less of a whimper, and that was a little sad. So,
yeah.
um,
It's interesting to me that she wasn't recognized as vital as, because she was right there on the final splash page when he's, when we're kind of leaping into whatever happens next, and he's taking on the Rhino. I mean, she's right there. We certainly intended for her to stay part of the cast and be his teacher ongoing, and explore what their friendship was really like. So it's interesting that she kind of disappeared. Even more so because she was named after Mark Grunwald, and with that whole idea that she was there to explain the Marvel universe to Kevin, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, there are always going to be choices like that when you create for a publisher. It is what it is. I mean, I believe me, I read your review of the new Marvel Legends action figure, and I was pleased and gratified that you talked about they forgot the earring and the left hand glove, and that I actually talked to somebody online. I'm trying to remember who it was. I'd have to go look at my private messages, but he said the Hercules Marvel Legends figure had a left gripping hand that he switched out.
Yeah.
So he was able to give his Thunderstrike a left hand, because he had him holding the hammer in his left hand, the base in the left hand. And I went, how the hell did you do that? He said, oh, that Hercules fit perfect, that kind of thing. So he used the Hercules hand.
Yeah, that's kind of my plan, is to get a Herc hand, kind of paint it to be right, add the glove. Like, I've painted wargaming miniatures for years, so I'm looking at a 6-inch figure going, oh, I could do that in 5 minutes and it'd be perfect. Other than, the typo on the back, but,
Is it a typo? No, that's what I find interesting, because when most people now complain about, why does he look so angry? I said, well, on the box it says Kevin, so I guess Team X.
Yeah, I mean, it could be.
Because, for part of issue 1 and for part of issue 2, he was in his dad's form, so, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, when I was trying to figure it out, like, when they announced the character, I flipped out and scared my wife, because she was like, what are you screaming about? And I'm like pointing at the video, like, do you know what this means? And she goes, oh, you're nerding again. And I'm like, yes. And she's like, okay, well, you want to make sure you were okay. I'm like, yeah.
I mean, overall, I like this one better than the last one, where he was a little thinner and smaller, and there were more things wrong, like the costume didn't come out onto his shoulders and things like that.
Yeah. I have a.
It's neat. They got the base right for the most part.
Yeah. Nice, Yeah. I'm looking at, in where I'm sitting, I have a whole bunch of my commissions behind me on a wall, including yours. And then I'm looking at my shelf that has like all the figures, and I cosplayed him in 2016. So like my wife made me.
I saw the picture on your blog.
Yeah, my wife made the mace, so like that sits up there. So yeah, it's it's a family event. you know.
There you go. I'll have to show you. I paid years and years and years ago. I paid a friend of mine who grew up to work in special effects in California to create a Thunderstrike base. I built one out of cardboard, exactly the way I saw the base and the size I saw the base and everything. And I sent it to him, and he made a cast. And Tom DeFalco owns one, and I own one, and then I have one that was kind of a one that didn't come out as perfect, that kind of thing, in a box somewhere. But I'll have to send you some pictures of it because it's about as perfect as you're going to get. When we did the miniseries, the Kevin miniseries, I actually used it for reference for the cover and a couple of other shots in there, because it's exactly what I was picturing. It's exactly how it was designed. It's interesting how, different artists look at it, and some get it incredibly right, and then others get it like incredibly wrong.
Little off.
But but that's what makes horse races.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, at this point, it'd be a great toyetic thing. And since they're making helmets of like War Machine, and you can make a toy mace and send it out to kids and be like, here, and they would love it.
I was always shocked that they actually merchandise Thor. I always thought Thor would never be merchandised because he is a pagan god.
Right.
That is still worshipped in some areas of this planet. That kind of thing. So I never really thought that Thor would ever be, successfully marketed or merchandised that way. So when I go into a store and I see 15 different Mjolnirs hanging on the toy racks, it never ceases to amaze me. But yeah, I mean, if they wanted to make a Thunderstrike one, it would be interesting to see. The one I have is actually built. The guy put a real chain on it, so it has some real heft to it. It's only because of the chain. And I have some pictures in my laptop. I'll send them to you in the private message.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really cool. And I've seen other people build their own, and it's like I said, it's always weird and flattering and neat to see that people love the character as much as they did. That's the best you can hope for when you create a character like this.
Yeah, he has staying power. He's that thing where you can look at and read and see, and you're like, like you mentioned, he's got this 90s look, and then the book is not the edgy 90s thing that you're like, okay, this is nice, and in being able to introduce people to why I like the character, I think is part of the fun because of those reasons,
Sure.
Like
I said, I'm always, flattered and humbled when somebody is carrying the torch. There's a young woman cosplayer who's doing podcasts now for the same kind of thing for Spider-Girl, and kind of keeping that, keeping the character alive and keeping the conversation going about the character and all that kind of stuff. And in many cases, you guys are doing more for those characters than Falco and I are doing right now, because we aren't being currently pursued to actually contribute to the conversation or the character much. So it's always my pleasure to meet somebody like you, and I'll be keeping an eye on your blog from time to time too, because I have enjoyed reading through it.
Thank you. That means a lot. Yeah, it's discussing with a friend of mine who is a manager of a comic shop. 2019 was us screaming into the void because he's a Black Knight Dane Whitman fan, and then I'm a Thunderstrike fan. And then the one shot came out, and I was like, see, if you yell in the void loud enough, somebody somewhere can hear you.
Well, Black Knight's going to be in the Eternals movie.
Right.
So there you go.
And so we both had this wonderful flip out moment, but it's a lot of fun to get a phone call from a comic book shop going, you don't have to ask. We have 4 copies on hold. And I'm like, thank you very much. And you know, and I don't know if you had read it, but like on the blog, one of the ones I do is there's one called The Epic Journey to Get Here. Um, the Epic collections that have been coming out, you know, you and Tom, you guys are heavily being collected right now with your Thor run. I think the next one comes out next week,
Oh, is that
and
right? Okay.
and it collects, I think, the Thor War storyline all the way up to like 450. And when the Epic collections were coming out, it was right around the same time I got onto a board about custom binding comic collections.
Yeah, I saw your posts about your custom bind. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
incredible.
And so my hope slash dream bucket list thing is someday whenever this weird 2020 thing finishes up and conventions are around, uh, crossing paths with you so I can be like, please sign this.
Well, it will be my pleasure, believe me. Believe me. Yeah, we were actually quite flattered because the first wave Epic collections actually was one of the first ones that they did was the War of the Pantheon, I guess they're calling it now,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that kind of thing. And you know, that's always nice when people have some faith in the material that it's going to sell and everything, the way to launch it. It was for me, it was a little bit of a balance because they stopped the essentials right when the next issue would have been my run on Spider-Man.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean they actually ran one that had the Kid Who Collects Spider-Man in it, 248.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the next issue of the Essentials would have had the cover of 252 on the cover, and it would have been the lion's share of my run on Spider-Man, and that's when they decided to cancel the Essentials.
It's like,
Oh well.
yeah, it's like that. Oh, they stopped sharing. And then they're like, but we're
Yeah,
gonna, don't worry.
I really enjoy seeing the artwork in black and white and everything. And I keep the Essentials on a bookcase here for really fast reference for things, you know.
Sure. Mm-hmm. One question I did have, and you kind of touched on it when it came to how Eric is seeing the last issue where everybody comes to pay their respects, and
Right.
and Kevin calls Bobby Dad.
Yep.
The one thing that I always kind of looked at the end of the series, it also felt cathartic because it seemed like that was the moment where Bobby and Marcy, it clicked for them who Eric was and what he was doing and all about. Do you think that was, you know, intended to be such a cathartic moment and where they came to grips with all these times that Eric was a slough off, he was really like trying to do the best he could by us all?
Well, and Brady's attitude had been changing. You know, he had a different respect for Eric when he gave Eric the chance to punch him,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, things like that. So he was his attitude about Eric had evolved during the course of the series, and his own journey with steroids. You know, he started out very, very arrogant and seeing himself at a much different level than Eric. And I think going through the steroid thing and not losing his family gave him a different attitude about Eric as well. But it was important to me to have Kevin call Bobby Dad.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of choking up because the ending of that always gets me. But the reason it was important to me is because it was important. I felt it was a nice, simple way to show that Kevin was going to be okay.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it really was. And then even the end with like Jackie Lucas putting the Polaroids down and her, you know, saying that we're going to be okay. Like, you know, it's almost, you know, in terms of like tying it to something else, like at the end of Endgame with Pepper Potts telling Tony, we're going to be okay. It's time to rest now. Like I saw that and I was like, that is whether intended or not, or me reaching, like I immediately thought of that last page from Thunderstrike. It was the we're gonna be okay, and what you did and what you gave up is it's we get it.
Well, that's why it was the Stanley and Jackie because we wanted to put the period on the fact that he saved some people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ultimately, I wanted the last shot to be Eric Smiley.
Yeah.
And that was a way to do it without doing something cheesy with him up in the clouds or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
And we still got a chance to address it on that final issue of Thor that I was able to co-plot with DeFalco, with Crusher Creel and all that kind of stuff, that was an important. There were some scenes in there that I would have liked to have gotten into issue 24 that we were able to get into that issue of Thor. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
On the John Buscema drew?
Yeah.
Because the scene with Mulder and Sif, I would have liked to have gotten that scene into Thunderstrike 24 if I could have.
Yeah.
Where, Sif was talking about how she saw Eric and everything. So that, I was glad we were able to get that in. The whole dynamic with Crusher and Thor, was now because of Eric, and I thought that was well done and well scripted by Tom and incredibly well drawn, of course. So, I mean, there was a lot of stuff we did in MC2 that I was really, really happy with, as far as, how Kevin grew up and how he saw his dad's legacy and the walking a mile in his shoes thing and making friends and all of that. But anything that we didn't get a chance to do in MC2 because the book only went 12 issues, we kind of packed into the miniseries because, Bobby did grow into the job. Bobby did become a dad for him.
Mm-hmm.
In MC2, it's mentioned that, Bobby never understood Kevin's desire to study art. But in the 616, apparently that drive for art wasn't there, so it is what it is. The one line I did like is that Bobby became such a fan of Eric that he used it in his parenting all the time.
Yeah.
Like, what would your real dad think? And Kevin had had enough of it, I believe he called it Ouija board parenting,
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. I mean, but solely for the purposes of the end of the series, issue 24, I felt that was a very clear emotional way to show that Kevin was okay. He had accepted Bobby as a dad. He was okay. He understood Eric's sacrifice. And there's even a little thing I threw in that if you look at that last page, well, the last scene, not the last page, that's Jackie, but the last scene with Kevin and Marcy is Kevin grows up a little bit in that scene visually. He turns and he says that thing to his mom about, I think he was proud of you too. And excuse me, this is tough. But Kevin shoots a smile at his mother, and he has the lines on his cheeks that Eric always had.
Yeah.
And I did that really deliberately because we had never seen that on Kevin yet.
And he's growing into his dad.
It was a little thing I threw in, like a legacy thing,
And it's so beautifully done, and it's kind of that, as I looked at it, it was this like Masterson family thing of, letting everyone around you know that it's going to be okay. So
that was it.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. It really is.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I have. There's one other question that always kind of got me with the series.
Okay.
Why wasn't there ever like an annual issue? Because looking in the 90s with all the like.
I don't know. I think those decisions were made often on the fly.
Okay.
Because the sales on Thunderstrike were very strong.
Sure.
Thunderstrike did not get canceled because of bad sales. Thunderstrike got canceled because of Ron Frenz people coming in and saying that they actually said at a meeting, if we cancel half the line, the half that's left will sell twice as well.
No.
And Tom DeFalco laughed out loud, thinking they were kidding, and he was shortly thereafter he was fired as editor-in-chief. Mm-hmm. Most of those books were selling just fine. Thunderstrike had terrific newsstand sales. War Machine was selling okay. What was the Force Works was doing okay, but mm-hmm. those were the one-off books. Those were the spin-off titles. So they were all summarily canceled. It had nothing to do with sales or anything.
Yeah, and I mean,
the thing that bothered me the most about that was, okay, you're not going to cancel Thor, you're going to cancel Thunderstrike. But then a couple of years down the road, they did Heroes Reborn, and the Image guys didn't have any ideas for Thor per se, so they canceled Thor.
Yeah.
And it's like, you sons of bitches. If I could have looked into the future and saw that you were going to cancel Thor 2 years down the line or a year down the line, we would have fought harder for Thunderstrike.
Right.
I mean, it was ridiculous.
And I mean, as a fan reading it, like, I read Thunderstrike because the art was what appealed to me. The writing is what appealed to me. So, you cancel it and you kill it, and you're like expecting me to go to Thor. And then at the time, they also transitioned to what I call like that kind of like Malibu comic style art that, when they released it as a epic, I read it and I was like, this is not great to read for me. Like,
it was Mike Diodato and all that kind of stuff. They went a completely different direction. One of the things that annoys me about issue 24 is Tom's little goodbye. The way it's designed and everything just looks horrible to me. It almost looks like it's a Christmas announcement or something. And they only gave him half a page and decided to spend the other half advertising what the next arc was going to be in Thor. And it's like, why are we taking a page of the end of the Thunderstrike series to advertise Thor? That was kind of a sign that they knew a lot of people were going to see the final issue of Thunderstrike.
Yeah.
And that's really annoying. That we were being canceled, and yet they were using our book to advertise what they were going to do next in Thor.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God.
It was like the old having like the mail-in subscription, and then the book cancels, and they give you something that's quote unquote like it, and it's like, no, it's not what I need.
Right.
But the annual question was always kicking around in my head because, I look at it and it's like Darkhawk had 3 annuals, but as well selling as Thunderstrike was, and then I'm also a big fan of like Silver Sable and the Wild Pack, like that had 35 issues. It's like you got into two plus years of books and there was never an annual. And as a fan reading, like those were where you had multiple teams doing stories. There was always like a pinup that you could tear out and put on your wall because I was like 8 and dumb and didn't care what comics were worth. So I was always like that.
I don't know. I will tell you this: there was a completely different wrap up to the Thunderstrike series. At one point, they were doing this thing where they were asking us to occasionally record these things for. There was like some kind of a phone you could call 1-800-Marvel or something, and you would hear some creator talking about something that was coming out in the next few months. And at one point, they asked me to do one on the wrap-up of Thunderstrike, right? And at that time, if anybody remembers that recording, I talk about a bunch of stuff that ended up never happening because we were supposed to get a double-sized issue 25 to wrap up the series. And we had a couple of subplots going on. We were going to bring back the Enchantress and Matt Ballers from the construction site was going to become a new stand-in executioner, working for the Enchantress and stuff. And we had this whole thing going on that was going to happen. That was all part of. I think I'm not sure. There was even it was one of the ideas we used for the What If that had Eric in it, where Eric was going to lead the Avengers in a fight against Mangog.
Yeah.
And all of that was going to be part of the big wrap up of Thunderstrike. And I don't remember the sequence of events, but I remember, we thought we were going to have a big double sized 25th, so we were planning for that. And then we were told, no, 25 is not going to be double sized. And then we were told, oh, you're not going to get a 25. So we had to start throwing stuff out. We said, okay, we got to get rid of that. We got to get rid of this. We got to tighten up the whole ending to fit it in by the end of issue 24, regular size issue 24. So, given that, I think we did the best job we could under the circumstances. But yeah, there were a bunch of little bits and character returns and things like that we didn't get a chance to do because of the constantly shifting schedule. So, and that probably had something to do with Roman's people as well, I would think.
Well, that's too bad because 25 would have been fun. And was the plan though that Eric was ultimately always going to end up sacrificing himself though?
Yes.
So
even if Thunderstrike never would have happened, then Eric would have died as the filling Thor, killed by Loki, and Thor would have said, "Okay, it was a mistake for me to put a target on Eric's back. I got to go back and take care of Earth."
Mm-hmm.
And he would have gotten his revenge on Loki and blah blah blah, that kind of thing. It was always our intention that Eric was going to get caught in he's a regular guy from Long Island. He was going to get caught in the gears. He was going to get caught in the cosmic gears, and he was going to get chewed up. That was always pretty much our feeling about the as good as the character got. It was one of those things that we wanted to make a point that ultimately his humanity was his strength, but ultimately it would cost him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you mentioned like how sales came up and said, "Hey, we want you to continue doing him." The one thing that when doing my blog and stuff is there wasn't a lot of merchandise around him. Back in the 90s. And then like in the last year, like right now I am wearing a teal blue Thunderstrike t-shirt I bought off Amazon along with a pop socket.
I have two of them hanging in my closet.
And my, every once in a while eBay is wonderful because like the one thing that I found was like from the old comic pages you could order t-shirts and pins and stuff. There was a Thunderstrike pin. And I had never seen it, and so it's like I got that. But then I had also found a T-shirt from like New Dimension Comics. Was hosting like a meet and greet with you, and it was signed. And I'm like, well, I kind of want that if that's the only thing around. And then all of a sudden, like last year, it's like, do you want a magnet? Do you want a T-shirt? Do you want a pop socket? And I'm like, I do, but why did you wait 25 years?
Constantly shaking our heads because even with Spider-Girl, they're doing new Spider-Girl action figures all the time, and they just did a pop bobblehead of Mayhem, from the Spider-Girl series, and it's just weird shit like that we're kind of, we kind of shake our heads because there's also a version of that T-shirt on black, that I saw somewhere on the web too. So there's. Why would there be a Thunderstrike T-shirt now? I have no idea. There was one at the time at the launch. There was a shot that had the cover shot. He was colored wrong, but it was a black T-shirt that had the shot from the cover of #1. But his boots were colored yellow and all that kind of bullshit.
Well, that's when you just look at someone and go, really, like, come on.
Yeah, I know.
Do they at least like when they made the legend or they made the T-shirt? Because like the T-shirt I have is cool. Do they make sure to send you a care package and be like, thank you?
No. I actually got an Eric action figure. DeFalco bought one for him and one for me off of eBay and sent it to me. And just yesterday, I received a package from a Spider-Man website that I have helped out a little bit. And as a Christmas gift, they sent me another Thunderstrike kids' figures. So I have one out of the package and one in the package. So I'm thrilled about that. But no, they do not send them to us. I didn't know anything about I found out about the T-shirt by accident. And I still would like to see if I can find one on black. It's the image is colored the same way, kind of Miami Vice colors, but the T-shirt itself is black. If I can find one in my size, I wouldn't mind getting that too. But yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. I'll never understand what they think.
I will always
or why they think it.
I will always keep on lookout. So if you ever get another PM of like, do you have this? And you answer no, I will be like, I will try and get it to you.
That would be fantastic. If you keep your antenna out for that thing, if you find something new, then please let me know. I'd appreciate it. I'm not real big on buying things offline. I just don't like to have my old. I don't like to have all my information out there.
Sure.
But I have people who will do it for me.
Yeah.
If I don't do it myself, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, last year my parents, they bought an advent calendar that Funko put out like a Marvel advent calendar, and
I remember. Yeah.
The biggest thing to me, I was so excited. They used Eric on it as Thor from the cover where he takes over.
I saw your post about this. Yeah, I saw your post about this.
When I opened it and it wasn't him, I was just like, this. Can I send it all back?
Well, that's the thing, because Eric was the only reason that we ever had a Christmas issue of the Mighty Thor.
Oh.
So
I'm looking at the time and I realize we've been talking for an hour and a half and I don't want to take up your entire morning. And then I'm also looking and somehow my recording glitched and I think I lost about 10 minutes. But if I could have your time for one last question.
Sure.
And to me, this was like kind of the most important. What feels like the most rewarding thing, like looking back at your creation of Eric and Kevin?
The fact that people are still talking about the character, the fact that people still embrace the character. Every smiling face that comes up to me at a convention and gives me a stack of Thunderstrikes to sign and says, "Boy, I love Derek. It would be great if he came back," or anything like that. The fact that the character still resonates, the fact that people are still responding to him, the fact that all these years after publication, you and I are having this conversation. That's the most rewarding thing, is that the character touched people, and that they're still talking about him. That's it.
It's a good legacy.
Yeah, I think so.
Sure.
I mean, the legacy itself is that we entertained people for a while. That's all we're hoping to do as a comics illustrator, as a comic storyteller. You're hoping to give people an experience that helps them shut down the real world for a little while and give them some enjoyment. And that's why I never understood people who hate read or people that really like the really dark stuff and everything. Because as far as I'm concerned, I wish every new show would come back and not deal with COVID at all.
Right.
I would love for these shows to not feel that they have to deal with COVID.
Right.
Because that's our grim reality. When I turn on the TV, I want to escape. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the fact that DeFalco and I have been able to provide people with, a means of occasional escape from their grim reality, that's the reward, and that's the reason we do it. And if we can do it successfully occasionally, then you can't ask for more than that.
Well, I sincerely thank you for that, because, like I said, I've basically followed now your art and this character and everything. Like, it was an integral part to my childhood and continues into my adult life. And I certainly hope we can yell out in the void for you and Mr. DeFalco to get another shot at Kevin and Eric. So.
Never say never. I never thought we'd do a 10-page Eric story, so who knows, man? I just never say never anymore. But I honestly don't know at this point. But yeah, it would be a trip. And apologize, to your wife for me for for providing her husband with his geekosity. Although that's got to be one of the reasons she loves you. So there you go.
I certainly hope. I think it is.
It's part of the total package.
It is.
It's got to be part of the package. There you go.
Well, thank you again.
It's been a pleasure, man.
It has, and if it's all right, I may reach out to you again sometime, and I will always keep out an eye on things just to see if you've got them.
I appreciate it. You got the phone number, you got the email, stay in touch.
I will. Problem. Thank you so much, sir.
Take care, man.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey everybody, it's Matt from Speaking on Strike. I want to thank you for sitting through the interview that I had the opportunity to do. A very, very special thank you to Mr. Ron Frenz for his time and his answering of my questions and my ability to just fanboy out. It was an absolute honor to interview my favorite comic book artist of all time and the co-creator of Thunderstrike. A special thank you to anybody who's read the blog or subscribe to my Instagram page about it. It's great to see this kind of build and have gone from a just passion project into something that I get to share with people. Another special thank you to a buddy of mine, Greg, Midnight Medicine, for letting me use his song for my inner and outer for this, and I certainly hope with the coming new year that I get a chance to do a couple more interviews here and there, to continue writing, and I have some things lined up that I'm really looking forward to sharing with you. So, until the thunder strikes, remember, the world still needs heroes.